psychological stress contributes to bone loss. When we have mental emotional stress, whether that's the worry or the fear from the diagnosis, now we're moving on. Anything in your life you're worried about or scared about, have anxiety about, feel hopeless or helpless about, can cause your body to fall out of balance and can actually cause a loss of calcium from your bones. If you like what you're hearing in this episode today about is osteoporosis all in your head, I'd like to recommend that you go to my website, debbierobinson.com. I have masterclasses and group programs that help you learn how to take control of your bone health. And the aspect of stress is a big interwoven piece into the work that I do with ladies with osteoporosis. As a functional health coach, I run functional labs to help them uncover the imbalances inside so that they can heal their gut and set their body up to digest and absorb the nutrients possible for bones and to stop bringing in triggers of the root causes of bone loss on one hand. The other hand, as a yoga therapist, I teach breath work and meditation and the physical practice to manage stress, to use stress appropriately to build stronger bones, stronger muscles, and to manage mental emotional stress, because mental emotional stress leads to bone loss. Look at www.debbierobinson.com, and I hope to meet you one day or see you in a class that I teach weekly or on a wellness journey or in one of my programs. There is so much that you can do, ladies, and that's what I'm here to help spread the wisdom and the word about, is that you can reverse osteoporosis. Hello. This episode, I'd like to discuss the topic, is osteoporosis all in your head? So I want to give you some food for thought for this one. And I want us to think about this because it's something that I've noticed over the years, is the critical role the actual diagnosis of osteoporosis has initially, and what it either causes you to do or not do, and how that has an effect on bone density. So let's begin with a diagnosis. Okay, Lindsay, stop I don't want to say let's begin with that one. We're going to do this. So let's begin with the time before you were diagnosed with osteoporosis or osteopenia. And think about yourself before you got that diagnosis. What were you doing? Did you feel strong? Were you taking care of yourself, exercising? Was osteoporosis something you had heard about? Did you know much about it, what it means, what the numbers are, how it's diagnosed? Did you have a baseline before menopause? Or for any particular reason, did you have a DEXA scan in your 40s or early 50s? And then think about that moment when you received the diagnosis, when your doctor told you whatever the number was, that you were either had osteopenia or osteoporosis, and what else was said during that appointment. So remember that time, go back to that time, and depending on where you are in your journey, for those that are newly diagnosed, that's a much more fresh feeling. For those that have been on this journey for years and years, see if you can go back to that time. And especially the minute you found out. And then from there, what did your physician say to you? What were the numbers? What were the words? What were the things you remember from that visit? Do you remember words like severe? Do you remember risk, fracture, different terminology that may have been used by your physician? And then what were the recommendations? Were they medications? Were there options of medications? Was there a description of, first we'll try this, we'll do the bisphosphonates, then we may have to go on to that? Were there explanations about the why behind leapfrogging from one medication to the next? Because there is no pill for osteoporosis. There's not one pill that will cure osteoporosis and all of the things that come with osteoporosis. There's not a pill that will stop you from falling. Bones don't break because they're fragile, they break because we fall. There is no pill that improves your balance, your posture, your alignment, and all those other things. So in that course of description, if you were given a description or given options, and many aren't, it's just here's what we're going to take now, and there's no other awareness or no other education. And these are the conversations I have with ladies all the time. So they get the diagnosis, the doctor wants to put them on a bisphosphonate or another medication, they research it, they come to their own conclusions, whatever that may be for you. For those of us that are naturally minded, for those of us that come out of a doctor's office and rip up prescriptions, that's me. That's many of the women that I work with. And if it's not you, that's fine too. I just want us to think here. I want us to be in charge and to take control of our health as we age, of our body, of our bones, to not give this power to this machine that you may have been laying a certain way, that technician may have viewed it a certain way. You might be a small petite person with small petite bones. There's a lot of variation in the DEXA scan score itself. So the DEXA scan is what most of us have, as most of us find out the reading of our bones. The newer technology, and I'll have an episode on this soon, the echo light, which is an ultrasound. And that's a better diagnosis for the bone quality, because the bone density is not what matters when it comes to fractures or fracture risk. It's the bone quality. So listen to the echo light conversation that I'll have soon, and it'll be one of the episodes that's available. But I want us to really be our own detectives, so that it's not just that we're told something and it's here, you take this. No, there are so many options. What are they? And that's why I have my podcast and why I interview the ladies and the men that I do, because I want to share what are those options. So there's a suggestion quite often of medications, and I even hear people being suggested medications when they have a negative 2.5, which is just in the diagnosis criteria for osteoporosis. And there's variability. So you very well may even have osteopenia, not porosis. So there's that. So I have ladies that are suggested right away medication. And then, I speak with women that have numbers that are in the 3s and in the 4s. And in some cases, depending on your physician, there may be a recommendation of calcium and a vitamin D. Well, calcium, 99% of it's stored in our bones. Yes, we need calcium. It gives the bones the strength. Vitamin D helps calcium get absorbed into the body. So those are two important. Those are two of the 4 musketeers for bone health. Yet that's a whole other topic. And there's a podcast, lots of podcasts on that, because you actually have to digest, absorb, and assimilate the vitamin D so that it will absorb the calcium. And then you have to have the other 2 musketeers, magnesium to put the calcium in solution and vitamin K to put the calcium in the bones. So vitamin K, vitamin D and calcium are quite often recommended. And by the way, I'm a functional health coach. I run functional labs on ladies. I probably only recommend 40% of the women that I work with take calcium. So it's a very large percent that doesn't need it, because I find calcium in the soft tissue outside of the bones, and then we have to address why that's happening in the body. It's not always about how much calcium you bring in, it's how much calcium is getting to and staying in your bones. So there's that diagnosis, there's the recommendations, maybe medication, maybe not, calcium, vitamin D, maybe. So here you are in that office, or you go home after the office, day of or a day later. How did you feel in your gut when you got that diagnosis? How did you feel in your gut when a recommendation of medication was given or anything else? Because that's your intelligent self, is the knowing part of you, and feelings of uncertainty or causing you to question things. That is a voice that we need to listen to, our internal intelligence, our internal knowing. So how did you feel in your gut? And when you had this diagnosis and you go home, what behaviors did you change? What did you stop doing in your life? Think about that. Did you slow down? Did you play less? Was there more trepidation in your feet when you were walking, when you were going places? Did you become more cautious in your daily movements? Did you tiptoe around? Did you hold on to things that you never used to before? When you go down the stairs, one lady told me, I started holding on to my banister when I went down the stairs because I was so scared I would fall and break my bones. What I notice is the looking down when women in my yoga therapy classes are, whenever we're challenging ourselves with balance, we may be near a wall, we may have a chair, or even if we're not around those things, everybody's looking down. The head is always looking down. And I always say, if you look down, you're going to go down, because where the head goes, the body follows. Where the head goes, the spine follows. So we need to stand upright and have that nice erect spine, allow the communication of balance for fall and fracture prevention to actually take place. But it's not something that you may be thinking about. So do you hold on to things? Are you more cautious? Did you go inside your body and wonder, are they dissolving right now? Are my bones breaking down right now? What are they like? Are they really, do they look like honeycomb? Are they really fragile and weak? Like, how did you feel about yourself? Because for me, when I say is osteoporosis all in your head, what I mean is that the feeling of fragility takes over when you get a diagnosis. You feel like your castles, your bones are like a sandcastle instead of a stone castle. And when you feel that way, you're going to do less. And when you do less, you lose more. Because the more you move, the more you pull, the more you push, the more you demand from your muscles and bones, the stronger they will be. So the diagnosis and osteoporosis being in your head is that it starts to become part of the way you feel, the way you think, and the way you move. So it really does start to become a very mental, emotional diagnosis, not just the physical aspect of what's happening in your bones in the four bones of the lumbar vertebra, which is what the DEXA scan looks at. And ironically, only the top two of those are the ones that fracture in the spine the most, and then the five above that. And then there's that hip diagnosis, which is the one that we're the most worried about because it could be deadly. I remember one time a woman told me she sits there and thinks, are my bones breaking down right now? Are they breaking now? Are they breaking now? Well, if you're thinking that, you are going to tiptoe through the tulips and you are not going to be running and skipping and demanding more from your bones when you're in this place of feeling that your bones are dissolving all the time like that. Did you feel or do you feel hopeless or helpless? Because that's a feeling that can happen when you get that diagnosis as well. Another aspect of the mental aspect, osteoporosis in your head, feeling helpless, feeling hopeless. Oh no, I may have to take those medications my doctor keeps recommending and I don't want to. Or, and I say that because I work with a lot of women that don't want to take medications, and I myself am that person. So for those that are naturally minded that believe that there's more to bone loss than what a pill could fix, that we actually have control over that process. Because when you in your mind get to the place where you know you can control your bone loss, then the feelings of realizing you don't have to rely on medications are an option. Have you altered your life in terms of the way you show up? Did you play tennis or pickleball? Have you slowed down with that? Do you run less or did you stop playing altogether? For me, when I had my bone issues, my hip issues, my collapsed hip joint, or in the beginning, even when I started having issues, I was so worried about my hip breaking that I stopped playing tennis and I used to play 5 days a week. Did you stop gardening or walking fast or running or hiking? A lot of ladies I work with stopped hiking because they were so worried that they would fall. And being away from home, being farther away, thinking you're going to fall out in public, that you're going to need assistance in public, that's a fear. So in supermarkets, on the street, on trails or traveling. And so even travel for a lot of women slows down when they get the diagnosis. And that's one of the ways that I know that osteoporosis in the head is lightening for the women, lightening up for the women that I work with, or lessening, because they start to travel. And I mean big travel, Turkey, Israel, all over the place. I mean, places that are far away, or they come with me to Bali, which from Los Angeles is a 24-hour journey, or Scotland on my trips. So when you start to feel more confident, you will travel more. And these are the ways that you understand that the osteoporosis diagnosis that's in your head is shifting. Gardening, playing with grandkids, giving your grandkids a piggyback ride. That's another area that I notice changes for people, is that they are worried about their grandkids, hugging their grandkids, picking them up. Some of the ladies I work with, they want to be able to bend over and take care of their grandkids because they're helping their children raise their children. And they want to be able to take care of their grandkids in the way that they would like. Also not to be seen as a frail, fragile grandma by their grandchildren and even by their children. So the diagnosis of osteoporosis and even osteopenia can elicit fear. Fear can elicit caution. Caution gets us to move less. And when you move less, you're demanding less from your bones and your muscles, and that leads to muscle loss and bone loss. Muscle loss is sarcopenia, bone loss, osteopenia. And when it gets to be a disease, it's osteoporosis. And we already have some of that loss. We have sarcopenia and osteopenia happening every year. There's a certain percentage, depending on how active you are, of muscle and bone loss. So the diagnosis and the lack of movement can contribute even more. They say that women that are sedentary can lose 3 to 5% of their bone mass annually from being sedentary. And when someone is sick, muscle atrophy happens so quickly. If any of you have ever had a surgery or a fracture of some sort, especially weight bearing, where you had to lay low for a while, you may notice that you lost muscle and bone mass. I'd also like to take this to another place, that when I say is osteoporosis all in your head, psychological stress contributes to bone loss. When we have mental emotional stress, so whether that's the worry or the fear from the diagnosis, now we're moving on. Anything in your life you're worried about or scared about, have anxiety about, feel hopeless or helpless about, can cause your body to fall out of balance and can actually cause a loss of calcium from your bones, because there's a hormone during stress called cortisol that is secreted. And cortisol secreted in the blood will affect the pH of the blood. The bones will dissolve to release calcium, which will bring the blood back into balance. That elevated cortisol also increases blood sugar. When the blood sugar is increased, the pancreas needs to secrete insulin. And when there's insulin secretion for an extended period of time, inflammation is triggered. Inflammation is a root cause of bone loss. So this falling out of balance biochemically inside from stress is the internal balance that affects bone loss. So when we have osteoporosis, we want to focus more on balance. You want to stand on one foot for fall prevention. So you do a lot of balance postures to strengthen your posture outside so that you can actually not fall. But just as important, if not even more so, is the internal biochemical balance, because that's where bone building and dissolving takes place. So cortisol is the hormone that is secreted during stress. And this can happen consciously, meaning that you know that it's happening, you know you have something going on in your life that's stressful, and you know you've been worrying about something or you've been anxious about something. There's also subconscious stress. There's this background stress that's happening from what our senses are telling us, what you're seeing, hearing, what you're consuming with your senses, that is also stimulating that biochemical response inside. Cortisol increases bone resorption, which is bone dissolving. And let me tell you how that happens, a few ways. Cortisol increases calcium to dissolve from the bones, to manage the blood pH, to neutralize the pH. That's one way. Another way is that Chronic stress equals chronic calcium loss, and it's more than your diet can provide. And you need your gut to be healthy in order for your gut to be able to supply more of the calcium that cortisol depleted from your bones. And so if you have gut issues or digestive issues, then you're not going to be able to bring in the nutrients, calcium being one of them. There's other nutrients that play a role in bone building. So cortisol can cause calcium to come out of the bones for managing the acidity in the blood. It also can affect the gut and the gut's ability to digest and absorb the nutrients that we need for bones, because the nervous system is innervated in the gut lining. And if your body is under stress, it will not digest. So you're either in the fight flight mode or rest and digest mode. And if you're in the fight flight, you're not resting and digesting. So that's another way that diagnosis or osteoporosis being in your head, because your head has so much to do with what you're going to do and what's going to happen in your body when it comes to building stronger bones. It also impairs intestinal absorption. So digestion is affected and absorption. And it's intestinal absorption, renal absorption of calcium is affected. And in premenopausal women, it inhibits reproductive hormones. So if you had chronic stress in your life, then you may have set yourself up unknowingly, subconsciously, to have less of the hormones that are protective for bone health, which contributes to osteoporosis. Because we know that we need hormones, we need estrogen, testosterone that are bone protective, and chronic stress is going to deplete those. It also alters the levels of growth hormones by modifying the HPA, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which is that stress axis between brain and adrenals where cortisol is secreted. And the growth releasing hormones are affected, and the growth hormone inhibiting hormones. So it affects the hormones that are going to build. Here's another interesting thing. When your body is under stress, it releases chemicals that can trigger inflammation and pain. Well, inflammation is one of the main root causes of bone loss, and pain makes you move less. And when you move less, you don't demand as much from your muscles or your bones, and that contributes to more bone loss. Less movement equals less muscle, less bone. So those are 5 things about stress that is good to note, and the understanding of osteoporosis being in your head, how much control we have up here in our head with this disease state in our bones called osteoporosis. So can stress deplete calcium? The largest body of evidence demonstrates that stress-induced depletion of magnesium and zinc. Magnesium is one of the 4 musketeers. Zinc, important for many aspects of health and internal biochemical balance. And these are animal and human studies, demonstrates the effects of stress on calcium and iron concentration. So there are calcium, iron, zinc, magnesium. There's studies showing the nutrient, the macro and the micro minerals, and the micronutrient aspect of stress and what it does internally. So it's that internal balance. So I like to think of this. We want to stand on one leg to have strong balance for fall prevention. We need to, inside the adrenal glands are on top of your kidneys. We need to stand on one kidney. So thinking about standing on one kidney to balance our internal balance in the way that we would balance our external balance. I know it sounds silly maybe, but I really find that if I can get someone to think visually and really understand your kidneys, your stress hormones are on top of your stress producing glands are on top, the adrenals, and we need the stress hormone to be managed internally for the internal balance of the body so the body can build more bones and not break them down. Psychological and physical stress can influence concentrations of several micronutrients, and that's what we need for that internal balance. What organ or organs does cortisol damage? Cortisol acts on the liver. Well, our liver does so many functions. It stores vitamin D and can even make vitamin D. It's where we convert stored blood sugar to energy. It's one of the areas where thyroid hormone is converted to the active form of thyroid. The liver filters the food that comes in our mouth take it from mouth to bones. It has to go through the liver in order to get that to happen. So the organ, the liver, the muscles, fat tissue, and the pancreas. Well, the pancreas secretes digestive enzymes to digest our micronutrients and our macronutrients that are going to build our strong bones. So cortisol, the stress hormone, affects those liver, muscles, fat tissue, and the pancreas. In the liver, high cortisol levels increase gluconeogenesis and decrease glycogen synthesis. What does that mean? Gluconeogenesis is that release of stored blood sugar, and glycogen synthesis. So this is the role of, what did you eat? Did you use it right away, or was it stored? And so when it comes to blood sugar regulation and management, which is behind so many functions in our body and in the world of health, cortisol is going to have a big effect on blood sugar regulation. And that is very important for us, for health and for bone health. Does anxiety weaken the bones? Clinical studies have found that bone mineral density in patients with anxiety or depression is lower than in other people. So that's what the studies are showing. Bone mineral density is lower in those that have high anxiety. The brain, which is a commander of the body, receives and processes external signals from what you see, what you smell, what you touch, what you taste, and what you listen to, and then sends instructions to the peripheral bones. So the effects on our bones are, what are we paying attention to? What are we watching, listening to? Is it real or is it perceived? Is there a real threat? Are you really being chased by a tiger? Make stress your friend. So you can make stress your friend. And you can make the diagnosis of osteoporosis your opportunity to say, I am going to take control here, and I'm going to do all that I can to turn this around, to reverse my bone loss. Now, I'm going to say this over and over and over because I hear it over and over and over in the population I work with. Just this week, a woman I've been working with for 2 years, major gut issues, an IBS, irritable bowel syndrome diagnosis, chronic gut issues, was in her bed, writhing in pain when she would eat something. I ran 4 functional labs on her. This woman followed this protocol to a T. She journaled her food. She brought in stress management. She used supplements to support her. She changed her diet in the way that she needed to change her diet. Now, she came to me in September of 2021, and in June of 2021, she was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and only at 2.5, negative 2.5. So her doctor put her on bisphosphonate. 2 months, it was horrendous, her experience on the medication. And she said, I need to do something. So she contacted me. We started working together. Fast forward, 2023, 2 years later, her next DEXA scan, she improved 0.4. She went from 2.5 to 2.3 in the spine, and in the hip, 1.8 to 1.4. What? I said, do you realize you reversed your osteoporosis? On her DEXA scan, the words osteopenia, osteopenia, osteopenia. Those words used to be osteoporosis, osteoporosis, osteoporosis. She travels. She knows that she's in control. Her doctor was a little bit perplexed. And she told him what she did, and he was still perplexed. And of course, the more this happens, the less perplexed the physicians are going to be, because they're going to hear more and more about reversing with ladies who are taking charge of their bone health. So we need to make stress our friend. The bones will respond to stress negatively or positively. Negatively with unmanaged stress, with cortisol secretion, with the diagnosis of osteoporosis in your head that causes you to be cautious, hopeless, helpless, move less, dance less, travel less, play less. That part of it will contribute to bone loss. The good part is that there's a law called Wolff's Law, And the idea of Wolff's Law is that healthy bones will adapt and change to adapt to the stress or stressors they are subjected to. So if the bones are subjected to heavier and heavier loads, if you're doing a yoga posture and you're bending deeper and deeper and putting more pressure in your joints, your muscles, your bones, they will naturally reconstruct themselves and accommodate to that weight. Ask and you will receive. Play more, dance more, walk more, hike more. Do it with awareness. Work on balance, on stronger feet, on more flexible ankles. If at first you need to be near a wall or a chair, do that. Practice yoga postures where you're loading into joints deeply, appropriately, safely, and strongly to create stronger, more limber, and more range of motion in your joints, your muscles, and then in your bones. So Wolff's Law is what we do. That's how we make stress our friend. I found a little piece. I find different things, different places, but I found this and I thought this was really great because it's like, this is yoga. The Orthopedics Association of Michigan said there are things you can do to relieve your stress and help strengthen your bones. You can exercise with an exclamation point. It's a great stress reliever. So it's going to relieve mental emotional stress. The other day in class, at the beginning of class, I asked everyone, how are you doing today? And one woman said, I'm really stressed out. I said, what's going on? She goes, I'm doing a remodel. So that class I taught that day was pretty challenging. And at the end of the class, I said, how are you all doing? And she said, wow, today is like challenging. I said, let me ask you a question. In this last hour, have you thought about your remodel at all? And she said, no. And that's the thing. So when you practice yoga, it's a great stress reliever because you won't be focusing on the things that give you stress. And it also brings the appropriate stress to the muscles and bones to strengthen them. And which is the weight bearing component. And using your own body weight is the safest. You're not going to, well, you could injure yourself if you're not being safe. And that's why I think it's really important you train with someone that knows what they're doing. Do not just take a yoga class for osteoporosis unless you're with a trained teacher. And they also recommend meditation to help lower stress and deep breathing. I'm like, well, meditation, breath work, physical movement, stress management, that's yoga. So is it all in your head? Is it all in your head? Well, we know that internal biochemical imbalance of stress, cortisol increased, will dissolve your bones to release calcium to neutralize your pH. It'll inhibit absorption of the nutrients. It will impair digestion, absorption, assimilation. It'll affect your liver, your kidneys, your pancreas, and affect your hormones, growth hormone and the steroid sex hormones. So it's not that it's in your head, but we have so much control in our head. We have so much control up here. So the control is in your head. Reality versus perception. Is what you're worried about real? So if you're worried about the future, the what ifs, those are not real. The only real thing is this moment right now, right here, today. This is it. This is what's real. What you're listening to, what you're thinking, where you're sitting, what's around you, this is real. Tomorrow is not. So is it reality or perception? And just notice to yourself, you can even say the words false or real, false or real when you're having thoughts. If you want to disrupt the thoughts of anxiety and worry, ask yourself, is this a real concern or real danger, or am I just projecting and worrying about something that's not real yet? You have to use it or you lose it. You have to use your body. And if you're in your head, worried, feeling fragile and breakable, you're less likely to use it. Posture plays such a role in bone health because if you have poor posture, you can contribute to spinal wedge fractures, which is what half of all fractures are. But the other thing is there was a study done on posture and cortisol levels. People in a rounded, forward, hunched over position had higher cortisol levels. And when you stood up and felt more empowered and in control, there was more internal balance when it came to stress hormones. So posture from a physical perspective and from a mental emotional perspective. Do you know what the number one risk factor is of osteoporosis is? Age. The older you are, the greater your risk of osteoporosis. and the greater risk that your bones will become thinner and weaker, because it's happening if you do nothing. And if you're not managing your mind, then it happens at a faster rate. And if you get involved, you could be the strongest, healthiest 80-year-old with the best, strongest bones that you can have, but you have to be working on it. What are the three main causes of osteoporosis? Number one is a decrease in estrogen in women at the time of menopause and testosterone, and a decrease in testosterone in men as they age. Well, stress is also going to affect those and deplete those, and stress that you had even before menopause. So the studies are showing the premenopausal women are also having a depletion in these steroid sex hormones that are so bone health protective. Being confined to a bed for a long period of time affects the bones. So being sedentary, that's one of the root causes. And then the last is having certain medical conditions that cause an increase in inflammation in the body. So having that internal biochemical imbalance or triggering inflammation, gut is a real big place to look for that. Being confined to the bed or being sedentary, and then the loss of hormones. So what I would like to say is this. Here's some other illnesses that illnesses that are caused by stress. These are the most common illnesses that can be caused by stress or made worse: depression, insomnia, cardiovascular disease, gastrointestinal disease, chronic pain, and cancer. And why I want to say that is depression is going to also contribute to bone loss. Insomnia is going to contribute to bone loss. Cardiovascular disease, because that's that internal balance in the pump moving everything around in your body. Gastrointestinal disease, yeah, because if you're not digesting or absorbing your nutrients. Chronic pain, you're going to move less. And then cancer, you're going to be so consumed by that. And then a lot of the cancer medications contribute to bone loss. So what is the moral of the story? Is osteoporosis all in your head? What do you think? Hopefully what you've learned is that a lot of the diagnosis of osteoporosis is in your head, in the way you feel, which will have an effect on the way you move, the way you sleep, the way you think, the foods you eat, the desire to take control or charge of the situation, and then the awareness on how important it is to find internal balance, standing on one kidney, because that's where we manage, that's where that adrenal gland is. So if that analogy works for you, great. Think about that so that you could think about, wow, I need the internal balance and I need to be able to do tree pose without falling out of it for 30 seconds or whatever it is. I hope that you learned something today or that you asked yourself some questions. My goal is to give you information. It is not to give you a fish, it's to teach you how to fish, because I want you to question and I want you to know that you can reverse your bone loss, you could take charge of your bone loss, and that you need to manage your stress, and you need to understand that if you feel a certain way, it's going to then translate to the way that you act and behave. And that's going to determine a lot when it comes to health and to bone health.